Hello everybody, my name is Irina and I live in Jamaica. The question is it safe to travel to Jamaica right now? Well, I have already made one video about traveling to Jamaica during COVID-19. It gives a general idea of what's going on, but there have been quite a few changes. There are new travel requirements and restrictions that you definitely need to know about. The information that I'm giving you now should be relevant until the 30th of September. But as I was writing this scenario for this video, the government changed information twice. So if they change it again, the link with update will pop up right here. And if you don't see the link yet, this means the video is still up to date. All travelers coming to Jamaica still need to get travel authorization letter from the official website. It's very easy to get it as long as you follow the travel requirements that we're going to see in a moment. But first, there are now a lot of bloggers on YouTube talking about traveling to Jamaica during COVID-19. The problem is, they're mostly sharing their personal experiences that might already be out of date, or might not even be relevant to you anyway. And this is because different rules apply to different groups of people. So before we go on, you need to ask yourself the following questions. Are you a Jamaican resident or not a Jamaican resident? What is the place where you are coming from? High risk or low risk? Are you going to stay in a place within the so-called COVID-19 resilient corridor or not? Are you staying in a resort or in a private home or Airbnb? What is your purpose of visit? The combination of all these factors might change the rules that are applied to you, which can make things really confusing. Should I really stay in quarantine for 14 days? What's the point of traveling to Jamaica then? Can I even leave my room? Some people say I have to do COVID test. Others say I don't. This video is going to make things really clear, hopefully. So let's start with who needs to take COVID test right now. If you're coming from a high-risk area, you need to do a COVID-19 PreTest. This means you have to take COVID test within 10 days before your travel date. You will then need to upload your COVID results on the official website to get your travel authorization letter, provided you have negative results, that is, of course. If you're coming from anywhere else in the world, this doesn't apply to you. You don't need to do any COVID pre-tests or anything. So who needs to do COVID test when they arrive in Jamaica? Before, everybody had to do it. Now it's different. Only people whose purpose of visit to Jamaica is business have to take COVID-19 test at the airport. Then they will have to wait for 48 hours for their results before doing any business in Jamaica. That's it. The rest of us are not required to do the test at the airport or anywhere else, in fact, like your resort and so on. There are currently 2 COVID-19 resilient corridors, and before we continue, you need to understand what these are. They're basically the areas where you can travel around Jamaica, get tourism services, visit attractions, restaurants, because people who work there are trained and know how to handle this. At least that was the original idea of the Resilient Corridor. Here's the map showing North Coast Resilient Corridor from Negril to Port Antonio, and South Coast Corridor was added later in July, and you can see the areas presented over here. These are important because if, for whatever reason, your accommodation is outside of these areas, you will not be able to visit anything in Jamaica. This brings me to the next COVID-19 update, which is related to 14-day quarantine requirements. Let's have a look. Since there is no COVID-19 test anymore required, the rules about 48 hours in your hotel and waiting for your results have changed. So who should stay in quarantine for 14 days? According to the official website now, everybody. But there is a difference in the type of quarantine, apparently. It depends on 2 factors. Are you a Jamaican resident? And are you going to stay within the COVID-19 resilient corridor, which I have just mentioned? If you are a Jamaican resident returning to Jamaica, or if you're not a resident but your accommodation is outside of resilient corridor, then you have to stay on property for 14 days. And the only time you can leave the property is once a day for necessary purposes like getting food. If you're not a Jamaican resident and your accommodation is within the COVID-19 resilient corridor, you should also stay in quarantine for the entire time of your trip. And if you look here, it says you should stay on property. This information with rules stay on property was added just one day ago. Before, it had said you could visit all the attractions within resilient corridor. Even they offered the list of tour operators to use and attractions to visit. And it clearly said that from the 7th of August, you could do all of these things. And now it says you cannot leave the property except with the express permission of health authorities. What is that supposed to mean? The thing is, every single person arriving in Jamaica is assessed at the airport. They go through screening by health authorities and then they receive an individual email with the description of things that they can do and cannot do. And I'm going to show you what it looks like as an example. It's a form like this that has ticks and statements describing what you're allowed or not allowed to do. For example, it says here, do not take any form of public transportation. However, you're allowed to use private transportation such as rented cars or private drivers and drive along the resilient corridor. For example, such famous places like Dunsrill Falls have received a certificate as a COVID resilient attraction and can be visited by tourists who have the individual permission from health authorities. But are you going to get this permission? The reality is the government understands that tourists want to visit Jamaica as a destination, not just to stay in a hotel. It just wouldn't make any sense. So the idea was that tourists are allowed to travel and visit all attractions that are qualified as safe, which basically means beaches, waterfalls, restaurants, and so on, like the outdoor things. But now it's kind of getting really confusing. And at this point, you might be wondering what's going on, why there has to be so much confusion and clarifications and changes. Well, let me show you why. This place is called Spanish Bridge. Tourists hardly ever go there, but it's a popular place with locals, as you can see. Like in every country, Jamaicans are also tired of being in lockdown for several months, and they want to take some time out with their friends and family. Fair enough, but as you can also see, nobody's following any rules. Nobody's wearing masks, not keeping the distance, basically breaking every single rule the government has implemented. To make the problem worse, some people from the US or Canada come into Jamaica to see their relatives, and this makes these kind of gatherings really dangerous for the locals. As a result, the government decided to close down every single river and every single beach where locals usually go, while leaving the popular tourist attractions like 7 Mile Beach or Doctor's Cave Beach open for tourists. Guys, it's politics. The government simply cannot say something like, if you're a tourist, you're allowed to enjoy Jamaica. But if you're local or have relatives in Jamaica, you should lock yourself in. This would sound like discriminating their own people. Even though they don't, they're trying to protect them. But many people would not understand that and would not accept that. The government cannot say a lot of things now, but I can. So let's have a look. Is it safe to travel to Jamaica right now despite COVID-19 pandemic? And is it even worth it? Let's have a look at COVID cases in Jamaica. As you can see, despite the border being open for the whole month and tourists traveling along the resilient corridor, the active cases were actually going down because all the precautions were taken seriously. Then, from the 10th of July, people stopped being tested at the airport, they were no longer strictly controlled, and gatherings were allowed. So before we know it, a spike of 30 new COVID cases. And yes, 30, not 300, not 3,000, but by Jamaican standards, 30 per day is a lot. The craziest thing is, though, you would expect COVID cases to happen in the area where most tourists are coming, right? But no, that's not the situation. It just happened in the furthest possible area, way outside of the resilient corridor, and tourists had nothing to do with it. You see, it's called resilient corridor for a reason. When foreigners come to Jamaica, they don't know anybody here. Their only points of contact are people who are trained to, wear masks, keep social distancing, sanitizing all over, and they're encouraging tourists to do so too. However, when people are coming from the US to see their relatives in Jamaica, let's admit, the situation is very different. They haven't seen the people they love for quite a while. They know everybody in the community and they want to come and pay a visit to every single one of them. It's not like they're going to keep social distancing or wear a mask. We all know that. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened. People came to their communities, didn't follow the regulations, and as a result, communities in St. Thomas and Clarendon are now in lockdown. This is why on the 7th of August, the US government issues warning level 3 COVID-19 risk in Jamaica is high. Travelers are at higher risk for severe illness from COVID-19 there and should consider postponing all travel, says the US. Really? I mean, the irony of having 30 cases in Jamaica and on the very same day, US having 54,000 cases. And they say that Jamaica is with increased risk of COVID. But anyway, to answer the question, is it safe to travel to Jamaica right now? For you, of course it is, especially if you're staying within COVID-19 resilient corridor. But you have to practice social distancing, wearing masks, sanitizing, avoid crowds, and just don't put other people at risk. Now, in general, if there is such thing as traveling during the pandemic, Jamaica is certainly one of the safest countries to visit. Some people say, well, maybe it's better to wait until COVID is over and then travel. Okay, but wait for how long? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? It's not going to be over anytime soon. We need to learn to live with it. Now, to give a short answer to will you have to stay on the property during the time of your trip when you arrive in Jamaica? Well, this will depend on the individual assessment by health authorities when you arrive at the airport, according to the information right now. And it will also be written in white and black when you receive an email from the Ministry of Health and Wellness. But do keep in mind the information can change every single moment, so just stay in touch. I'd like to finish off by giving a very important point. If you're planning a trip, you definitely need to know where to get the official, reliable, up-to-date information about traveling to Jamaica during COVID-19. And this official source of information is certainly not this YouTube channel. Come on. There are two official sources. One is the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Jamaica, which you can follow on Twitter. And two is the Ministry of Tourism in Jamaica with their official website, visitjamaica.com. These are the only two sources of information that you can trust entirely. Well, I mean, keeping in mind the politics and the wording situation. But that's what we have. The rest of the sources are not reliable or can be out of date. This includes the articles in newspapers, any newspapers like Jamaican or foreign, news on TV, friends who live in Jamaica, US government website, they have no clue what's going on in Jamaica. Guys, even Jamaican embassy in the US are not a reliable source because their job is to worry about their citizens in the US, not to provide tourist information. And don't rely on information from some random bloggers on YouTube. And this includes me, because no matter how precise the information I give, because I base it on the two official sources I mentioned, it might be out of date by tomorrow. So please, at least, check the info in the description. Of course, there is a problem with the official sources, and it's like way too much information. A lot of information is not relevant to you. Or if you simply have a short question, it might be difficult to find an answer. That's why I'm going to publish a video with frequently asked questions about travel into Jamaica during COVID-19 with links as proofs to the official sources. When it's ready, I'm going to publish the link here. And if there is no link, it means it's not ready yet. So don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the info. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Irina, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.